Is it the case that European nationals, that are our friends, that work with us, that are part of our community, whose rights are affected by what the Conservatives want to do not have that right to vote in our elections? That is an absolute disgrace. Those that pay taxes in our country should have rights of representation. I will give way one thing.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Can the right honourable gentleman tell me, are there any other European countries which offer the right for European citizens not from their country to vote in their national elections?
Scotland.
Well, if the honourable lady was listening, I just explained it's something we do in Scotland. But you know, the problem, Mr. Speaker, for the Tories is they can never make a judgment on what is the right thing to do. And we're talking about EU citizens that are losing their rights. But let me just remind the House what the Prime Minister said way back in July when he was responding to my honourable friend, the member for Glenrothes, and he was asking about the right to vote for EU nationals. And let me tell you what the Prime Minister said. Those guarantees, as the honourable gentleman knows, we are giving unilaterally in a supererogatory way. Well, there we are. The words of the Prime Minister doing exactly what we are calling for, and yet we find that the Conservatives are blind to these calls. So therefore I expect the government today to look positively on any amendments that come forward for EU nationals. There is nothing for the government to fear by extending the franchise. And of course, Mr. Speaker, there's one very important and salient point, and that is that EU nationals are already on the voters' register because they're allowed to vote in local elections. There is no logical, there is no moral reason as to why the government doesn't allow that. Mr. Speaker, this is about choosing our future. It is about choosing our future in Europe. It is about choosing a freedom from austerity. It is about opportunity. We cannot be held back anymore by Westminster. The SNP will take that message to the public. It was said in a letter many decades ago by Steinbeck to Mrs. Kennedy that Scotland is not a lost cause, Scotland is a cause unwon. Mr. Speaker, we will win that battle. Scotland will become an independent country, and the general election will be an important step on the way to completing that journey. Thank you.
Very well. I was going to call the leader of the fourth party, but very well. Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I first arrived in this House as a new MP nearly 2.5 years ago, I knew that delivering Brexit would be a complex problem, and I knew that achieving a negotiation between our country and our 27 nearest neighbours was going to be a huge challenge and cover many areas. I also knew that leaving the EU with a deal is in the best interests of so many of our constituents, especially those who have shared families with other residents from other EU countries, who have jobs that trade with Europe, who are involved in our security services, where they want to share data with our closest allies, those of our scientific community, who often work on collaborative projects that make a difference to our world's future, and where they want to continue to work with those in our neighbouring countries easily. The deal that the first Prime Minister delivered was challenging. Some people thought the backstop may last forever. I always saw it as a temporary issue, but I saw it as a way to deliver Brexit and move on. I voted for it. I voted for it 3 times. Our current Prime Minister has done what nobody thought he would achieve, and he's reopened those negotiations and found a different way to resolve the incredibly complex situation in Northern Ireland, with a solution that keeps open the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I voted for that deal again, and many colleagues from the opposite benches were brave enough to come through the lobbies with us to support it. I would have liked to have seen the programme motion carried. I believe our constituents expect us to roll up our sleeves and work day and night to get that deal over the line. I would have liked to have seen a second programme motion, but I genuinely do not believe that the opposition would have supported it. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Would she agree with me that the best way in which our governing party can face the electorate is to say clearly to the electorate that the best way of delivering Brexit is with the deal that the Prime Minister has agreed with the EU?
I absolutely agree, because the deal is in the interests of our country and has been negotiated with 27 other countries. And continuing this uncertainty does not solve anything. A second referendum won't solve the uncertainty. The Labour policy to try and renegotiate and then have another referendum and then another one does not solve the problem. Yes.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way, but she just made the case that a second referendum won't solve the Brexit impasse.
It won't.
And I just would like her to elaborate on that, because surely a question about whether this bill that the Prime Minister is proposing, unamended, that he has now pulled, so this House can't take it forward, surely a referendum on whether that proceeds or not actually does give a very definitive outcome. And perhaps if the House had allowed the British public a vote on the previous Prime Minister's deal, we could have had a definitive outcome many, many months ago.
The Prime Minister's Brexit deal was pulled the moment the programme motion was rejected. Sadly, I believe it's been... If I believed that the opposition were true about wanting to have a couple of extra days to scrutinise it, then I'd give it another chance. But they have proved again and again, when they failed to turn up scrutiny committees in this House again and again, when they failed to turn up the second debate again and again. I'm going to carry on with my thoughts. Yes? Okay.
Thank the Honourable Lady. Would she recognise that for the majority of people here who are concerned that we are leaving the EU, the main issue was not the backstop. It was the lack of clarity about the future relationship with our European neighbours and trading partners. And this second deal doesn't change that one iota.
The EU has made it clear since day one that we cannot discuss the detail on the future partnership until we have agreed the terms of withdrawal. That is in Article 50. Read it. It's only the tiniest paragraph. Read it. It is clear. The future framework, the documents on the future relationship actually cover a wide range of different issues. And I've been impressed by how much the EU 27 have been prepared to put into that document, saying that areas like cooperation on science and security and access to trade and the deepest free trade agreement, and detailing important issues like financial services and how they can work together in our regulatory environment and why sharing data is so important. That's all in the future framework. But we cannot discuss the detail on it until we've agreed the terms of exit. And every time the opposition parties say the otherwise, they are being disingenuous to the British people. Saying that you'd go back and try and have another referendum in a constituency like mine, which was 51-49, will not heal the divisions. It just leads to lack of decisions. And in my constituency, people want to get on and focus on other things, focusing on the more police that they're now seeing on the streets, the improvements we're seeing in our nearby hospital, the money that's coming into our NHS, the money that our schools have been asking for and is now being delivered, the infrastructure improvements that's just given my constituency the largest housing infrastructure grant in the country and unlocked a railway station that's been blocked for 20 years. The work that we're doing on the environment, well, incidentally, the Lib Dems couldn't be bothered to turn up for the environment bill last night. That is what my constituents want us to be working on. They want us to be working on the issues that affect them and their future, and not going round and round and round in circles on how we resolve Brexit.
Indeed. I think the Honourable Lady has finished her oration. Yes. Point of order, Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, I listened closely to the comments made by the member opposite, and she alluded to the fact that the Lib Dems were not present last night. That isn't the case. The spokesperson for the environment was here, as I understand it, from the Honourable member from Brighton for the entirety of the debate. So I would ask that that was amended in the record.
Has amended. No. Order. I don't require any help from the Honourable Lady. I'm perfectly capable of adjudicating upon these matters on the strength of 10 1/4 years in the chair without her sedentary chuntering. What I say to the Honourable Lady is she's corrected the record as she sees it. I wasn't in for that debate, but the Honourable Lady for Chelmsford appears to accept the veracity of what the Honourable Member for Wavertree says. But what I do know is that the Honourable Lady, the Member for Brighton Pavilion, because I saw it on the Annunciator, orated in the debate herself. She spoke in the debate herself. She couldn't have done so if she wasn't here. And she did, so she was here. Oh, if you really feel it's necessary.
Stand it, and I do apologise if there had been one member of the Lib Dem Party here last night. But as I saw it, the Honourable Member for Brighton represents the Green Party.
No. I'm perfectly well aware of that. The Honourable Lady's corrected the record as far as her party is concerned. She referred to the member for Brighton Pavilion who was here and did speak, and really, with the very greatest of respect, there's nothing to add. There are a lot of other colleagues who wish to speak in the debate, from whom we can now hear, and in whose contributions I'm sure everybody is interested. Jo Swinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The question that we are grappling with in this House, and indeed the debate in our wider country, is not just a narrow matter of our relationship with the European Union, although it's certain that this debate on Brexit has exposed significant differences in how people feel about those issues. The identities of whether people are remain or leave run deeply, because this is not only about whether we remain in the EU or whether we leave, it's about who we are as a country. It's about our values. It's about whether we are open and inclusive and internationalist in our outlook, whether we are facing the future, or whether we are closed and insular, wanting to pull up the drawbridge and look to the past. And that is the key question that we as a country need to resolve. I heard the Prime Minister in his remarks talk about our whole United Kingdom. I have to say, I thought he had a cheek, because this Prime Minister has not been acting in a way that is protecting our whole United Kingdom. He has sold out the people of Northern Ireland with the deal that he has done with the EU, with his latest withdrawal agreement. And this is a man who said that he thought no Conservative Prime Minister should ever accept a border in the Irish Sea. And yet that is exactly what he has done. And, Mr. Speaker, I and my colleagues on these Liberal Democrat benches think that our United Kingdom is something precious. It is something that is worth protecting.
We should give way.
That as Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland together we are stronger and we stand better together. I will give way.
I'm very grateful. On the United Kingdom, if there was a vote across the whole country, one person, one vote, on Prime Minister Johnson's deal, my view is the great majority of people would, or the majority of people would vote Remain. But wouldn't she agree that there's a great fear that with a minority of votes and a majority, the Tories could get a majority of seats if the Remain side splits, and we'll end up with a Brexit, thanks to her provocation?
Well, look, the honourable gentleman and I have both been campaigning for a people's vote. And I believe that that would be the ideal way to resolve this issue, to put this specific Brexit deal to the public. And he is right that I think the public would be likely to reject this bad Brexit deal, because it is a bad deal. And because if you look at the polls in recent months, in fact, you have to go back some way to find the Leave vote ahead of Remain, and that has been an increasingly consistent pattern in the last couple of years. And when I listen to people who support Brexit, and we see it day in, day out in this chamber, they struggle to agree amongst themselves about what Brexit should look like. To some people, the Prime Minister's deal is not Brexity enough. And to other people, they want to see a softer Brexit. So the suggestion that there is somehow a majority out there in the country for this specific Brexit path, I think is wrong. And that's why this does need to be put to the people for a final say. But I have campaigned for that. I have marched for that. We have argued for that. We have tabled amendments for that. And we have not been able to secure that. And my fear is that we will not in this Parliament. And we do not have a luxury of time, because the EU have given us an extension to the 31st of January. We need to resolve how we will use that time. We need to resolve how we will use that time, because further extensions should not be guaranteed. I'll give way to the Honourable Member for Tooting.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. We have both stood on a platform asking for a people's vote. My constituency of Tooting is the second youngest in the entire country. Would she agree with me that it is essential that 16-year-olds have the vote to save their future?
And we do agree on much with myself and the Honourable Member for Tooting, and I do want 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds to be able to vote. I think it is a change. Its time is coming, and I will always vote to support 16 and 17-year-olds voting. And I would say to those members of the House who are sceptical, because I have debated this issue over many years with many MPs, and I would say look at the situation in Scotland. Look at the success of votes at 16 in Scotland, where you see on polling day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, young people from 5th year and 6th year leaving school, walking down the road and going en masse to the polling station. And it is a sight to behold. And it is a positive step. And I have to say, there are many particularly Conservative members who were sceptical of this, who in Scotland have then come round to the idea after seeing that it is a successful change. So, of course, I will support that. I will give way and then I want to make some progress.
I wonder whether she's considered the Liberal Democrats' contribution to this present predicament, because their cannibalisation by the Conservatives in 2015, helped by the record, particularly on tuition fees and coalition, gave David Cameron the majority to get the referendum legislation through. So why on earth is she now making it worse by pushing for this early date? Because the uncertainty of the outcome of the general election certainly does not take no deal off the table.
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman that while we were in coalition, there was not a referendum on our membership of the European Union. And in fact, we passed a law that said that should only happen when there was a significant treaty change. It was the loss of Liberal Democrats from the government that meant that was able to be pushed through this House of Commons. But Liberal Democrats... I will give way to the Honourable Lady Member for St Albans.
But the Honourable Lady says that there wasn't a referendum in 2010 as a result of the Liberal Democrats. In 2008, the Honourable Lady, and I was here in 2008, the Honourable Lady in this chamber said, Mr Speaker, we are being gagged. Only the Liberal Democrats will offer an in-out referendum. So the Liberal Democrats were actively campaigning. They were saying that the Conservatives were only offering one on the Lisbon Treaty and they were giving the public a say. So whatever might have happened in 2010, she's been a long campaigner for an in-out referendum for the country.
Yep. Which we then voted to pass an act of Parliament to say that that should happen at the point of significant treaty change, which we have not seen. And I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. She has a beautiful constituency, which I am already very familiar with, and I expect to be there more in the coming weeks. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister, as I was saying, has not supported the United Kingdom. He has agreed to a border down the Irish Sea, and bluntly I think this is because he does not care sufficiently enough. This is all about him. It's not about even what he thinks is right for the country. Now, there are different views on the European Union across this House. If I think about the Right Honourable Member for Stone, who was in his place earlier, he has had a very consistent view on membership of the European Union. I have taken a different view. But most people in this House know where they stand on our membership of the EU. They don't have to write 2 different newspaper articles to decide which way to come down on that matter and to make that decision on the basis of what is more likely to get them elected as leader of their party. And the fact that the Prime Minister was prepared to make that call in his own interest rather than in the national interest proves he is not fit to be Prime Minister. This is a man who has been prepared to say anything and sell out anyone in order to become Prime Minister. No wonder people don't trust him. He said he would get a great deal. What has he brought forward? It's an atrocious deal. It's bad for our NHS. We have already lost 5,000 nurses from the European Union, 27 countries. It's a bad deal for our security. It's a bad deal for our economy. So bad that the government hasn't even published an economic impact assessment. So much for a party that like to say they were one of economic competence. Now they've even given up doing the analysis because they know the results would be so bad. And it's a bad deal for workers' rights and environmental protections that have been removed from the treaty and put into the declaration that is not worth the paper it's written on. The Prime Minister also said that we would leave on the 31st of October. That's Thursday, Halloween. And we are not leaving on the 31st of October. I, for one, will be celebrating that that fact is the case, that we are still members of the EU. So will the 3 million citizens in our country from other EU countries, and so will millions and millions more. It shows that the Prime Minister says one thing and isn't bothered about whether he delivers it. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
A question of trust. Isn't it the case that she has said her party's policy is to have a second referendum, but if that referendum comes up with the wrong result, she will ignore it? And if that doesn't happen, and her party were to get into majority government, then she would just dispense with Article 50 and ignore 17.4 million people. Why should anybody trust what she says? And why should anybody believe that she places any truck in being called a Liberal Democrat anymore?
I really have to scotch this suggestion. I'm not going to change my basic belief. And to be honest, I don't think there's many in this House who would. I think had we voted to remain in 2016, I wouldn't expect that the Right Honourable Member for Stone would suddenly think that being a member of the European Union was a good idea. And so, of course, I'm always going to think it's a good idea to be a member of the European Union. But what would be the case? I've not finished answering his colleague. What would be the case if we had a people's vote on the deal? If there was to be a vote in favour, I would at least have confidence that there was a majority view in the country in favour of leaving under those specific circumstances. And right now, I have no confidence of that whatsoever. And he mentions the policy of the Liberal Democrats to go into a general election and say to people, we are a party of Remain. We believe that our best future is in the European Union. And if you vote Liberal Democrat, We will do everything we can to stop Brexit. And if you elect a majority Liberal Democrat government, we will revoke Article 50. And that if we then are in that situation, as Prime Minister, on day one, I will revoke Article 50. That's setting out what you plan to do. And then if you're elected and win the election, doing it, that is exactly the essence of democracy. I've answered his point. I'm going to make some progress and let other people contribute to this debate. We, as a country, face huge challenges. We have a mental health crisis, particularly amongst young people, that needs to be tackled. We have schools that urgently need investment to make them world-class centres of learning. We need to take bold action to tackle the climate emergency because the scientists tell us that time is running out. And we have huge opportunities. We have huge reason to be hopeful. We have people who have huge innovation, ingenuity, our universities, our businesses, the spirit of entrepreneurialism in our country. We are in the middle of a technological revolution that can help provide answers to the climate emergency, to the shared problems that we face, to improve our health and well-being for the future. And we have, when I speak to young people, whether it's in schools in my constituency or the climate strikers or the people on the marches about remaining in the EU, those young people have an energy and enthusiasm that should be an inspiration to us all. And as members of the European Union, working with our closest neighbours, as a united kingdom, family of nations, strong together, working within the EU, we can reshape our economy and harness the technological revolution and build a brighter future. And that's the message the Liberal Democrats will be taking to the country in this general election.
Bob Seeley.
Thank you very much, indeed, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. I think we've had a filibustering of democracy for much of the last year. We've had endless games, arcane procedures to prevent Brexit, and we're now seeing the same games today to prevent a general election. I think this Parliament is really reaching new levels of absurdity. And in the leader of the opposition, we have maybe for the first time in history a man who can neither lead nor oppose. I still don't quite understand if he's supporting an election today or not. We need an election or we need Brexit. The party opposite voted against the Brexit timetable motion, which means that we can't proceed. So therefore, we have to go for Plan B, which is an election. Please do.
Can I just say to the honourable member, it's just wrong. On the morning of the vote on the first programme motion, the usual channels, the Labour usual channels, asked for a meeting. It was refused by the government. It's now onto the government to be able to lay down a new programme motion. They've refused to do that. That is still within the powers of the government to do that.
I have absolutely no doubt, given the bad faith that has exhibited over Brexit and this election, that if the government came with a new timetable motion, the party opposite would find ways of picking it apart endlessly. I'll give way again.
Because the usual channels in the morning, the chief whip from the Labour Party asked the usual channels whether or not they would be able to sit down and talk about a programme motion. It was the government that refused that. It's the government refusing to bring a programme motion. So the idea that somehow this House is stopping the debate on the withdrawal bill is absolutely not true.
Well, gentleman saying that the party opposite didn't oppose the programme motion because he opposed the party opposite opposed the programme motion. However, if I may just, I wouldn't mind making a bit of progress, but on the grounds of consensus, why doesn't the honourable gentleman's front bench come and say that, come and ask to renegotiate a programme motion now? I've given away twice, may I continue?
Just say to him, the reason why we oppose the programme motion is because a major piece of constitutional act was being put in place, which was going to be discussed in 48 hours.